Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thanks so much for joining us. We are here for Impact Caregiving. We're going to spend about 3 hours together. We're going to think through your work to serve and support family caregivers, and I hope that our event is helpful for you. I just wanted to mention a couple things as we get started. Here's our agenda. I adjusted the order a little bit, so I just wanted to give you an update about what our flow of insights is. Each workshop is around 20 to 25 minutes. We're going to do two, take a break, come back, do two, take a break, come back and do two. And for those who are here live, I'd love for you to share an introduction in the chat room. And if you are here live, please know that I'd love to hear questions and experiences. If you have an insight you'd like to share, please feel free to either raise your hand or use the reaction button where you can raise your hand. And if you have a question, let me know, and then just go right to your question. So you can say, my question is, and then ask your question. And then if I need more details, I'll say, I have a couple questions for you. And that way we'll keep everything moving along. Okay. And then I'm going to give you an evaluation to complete before we close today. So I just want to say that out loud. So I remember to do that. In addition, because I'm recording, I also will share the archive with everybody. So you'll be able to access the archive. Okay, so let's get going. And thanks everybody for being here we're doing this on a Saturday morning in May, which is also good. Okay, and if you are a mother, happy early Mother's Day. Mother's Day is tomorrow. And here we go. So let's start with questions. I'm just curious for you guys who are joining live. What's a good question that you like to ask? And what's a good question that you like to answer? Feel free to share some questions in the chat room. We're going to start with good questions because you're going to notice that throughout our time together, I'm going to ask you questions. And I think it's helpful as we start to think about what's my work, what's my impact because of my work, and where do I fit within the market? We're going to talk about that as we go through our day together. 4 years ago, I was in a situation where an organization that had a lot of money was using content without my content without my permission. And it turned into this unfortunate legal battle. They just wouldn't remove the infringing content. And it involved lawyers, and it seemed like this large company that had a lot of resources was going to win. And I was going to lose, having spent a lot of money and not getting the outcome that I really wanted. And it was really stressful for me because I felt this anxiety around this organization coming at me, knowing that I really believed I was in the right. And I felt like, wow, how am I going to actually right this situation? So when the stress got too much, I thought, okay, just go for a walk. And then as I was going for a walk, I would create a question to ask in my head. And the question was, in what wonderful, marvelous, lucrative way will this work out for me? It was a question that seemed to have no chance of being answered in a really nice way. Like, how was I ever going to come out of this situation in a good way? But I thought, well, let's just ask the question. So the walk made me feel better, and then the question made me feel better. And so whenever I felt the tightness of stress, I would pivot to opening up to the possibility that the question could give me. And it changed everything for me. And ultimately, the situation worked out in a really wonderful, marvelous, lucrative way. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought? So the questions open up possibilities. So once this experience happened for me, I thought, you know what? I want to do more around questions. So I started doing a weekly newsletter called The Sunday Question. And I also post the Sunday questions on Caring Our Way, which is our community. So if you're a member of our community, you know these questions come out every Sunday. And the questions have also been helpful for me in my business. So you can think about questions that you have about clients you want to work with, about your work, about your future, about your purpose, about your life. So as you guys look at these bullet points, I'm curious, which category do you have the most pressing question? I often have struggled with the question around clients. Who am I trying to reach? Who's the right client base for me? It used to be when I started in this space that the family caregiver space was a very specific niche. And that's not the case anymore. There are so many niches within our space that you can be really specific about who your client is. And we're going to talk about using your niche to connect to your client as we go through today. Okay, so Amy's sharing in the chat room that she's got questions about the future and about clients. Okay, it's this pivot from being in the home to helping more people. My allergies are kicking up today, so forgive me. I think that oftentimes we have questions around the unknown, and these bullet points are all unknown. Who's the client? And if we are new to a business, we might be new to attracting clients. So we haven't attracted one yet, so we can't quite figure out, well, who is the client? And then what's our work? What's our future? What's our purpose? What really is life about for us right now? And Beth is sharing in the chat room, I think, a really good insight. And her question really is around, how do I position my services when there are no magic solutions? And so we know that in a caregiving experience. I often talk about that people seem to think that there's this perfect solution, and there never is. I have never, ever, ever figured out a perfect solution. There's a compromise that works right now, and it could be the compromise that needs to be adjusted later. But I think that's a huge challenge for us. If we look at all the problems that family caregivers face, so we might think, but I don't have necessarily the way to change these problems because they're systemic. What I think about is helping people who are encountering these problems, helping them cope, helping them with their stress, helping them with their worries. So for me, a lot of my work is around, this is what your experience is like. This is the reality of it. It's awful. I'm going to help you with support so that as you go through awful pieces of the experience, you know that you have someone who is supporting you. So we're not going to change the system with a service or a product. We're going to change how people experience it by offering them support. I hope that's helpful, Beth. We can use our own personal caregiving experience to be inspired in our work. And I want to say that that's only a piece of it. So we get inspired by our experience because there's been difficult challenges. So Beth has had difficulties navigating the systems, which is why she wants to help people navigate the systems. Just one other thought, Beth, and it's also around creating a process to navigate systems. So it's support around our system, our experience within the systems, and the systems are messed up. So here's how you can navigate them. Here's a process. And it could be a 3-step process that you create. Here's what you need to know when you're moving into a system, these 3 steps. I'll just tell you about the 6 caregiving stages. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as a niche. But when I came up with that concept, I came up with 6 keywords for each stage. And it took me about 5 years to figure out that those keywords were actually coping strategies too. And what I wanted was to create simple strategies that family caregivers could use regardless of how stressed out and worried they were. It's the same with system navigation. 3 things to remember when you're navigating a system. Boom, boom, boom. 6 words to remember during your caregiving experience. Boom, boom, boom. It's also important for us to be open to what others experience. I have never met 2 family caregivers that have the exact same situation. Every situation has nuances that make it unique. And I think the more we open up to unique situations, the broader our insights and the better our solutions. Just recently, I connected with 2 family caregivers who were sharing something really interesting, which actually helped me in a business meeting I had this past week with a startup. And both of them talked about their decision for treatments as it relates to their caree and where they travel to get those treatments. And it was helpful to have these insights as I was talking to this startup who we're going to work with to create a shared decision-making tool. And part of the decisions that we make around treatment are, how close is it? How reasonable is it? How specialized is it? In my experience, we picked the treatment center that was closest for my parents. But these family caregivers picked the one that had the specialist because their caree had a really unique situation. So they decided to drive 2.5 hours to treatments. We decided to drive 10 minutes. It was fascinating to hear those insights. And so then we think about how do we capture that data so that regardless of where the location of the treatment is, there's a way for the family to get to the decision that's right for them, knowing that there are different factors within a decision. It's also important to know, what are your skills and talents? What are you good at? What do you want to be good at? And then what's the unique solution you want to bring to the marketplace? If you'd like, feel free to share in the chat room an idea for a solution that you've been thinking about, mulling over, wondering about. And it might be that it has stayed in your head because you're worried about bringing it out and what people might say about it. So bring it out with us. So feel free, if you want to, in the chat room, to share something that you've been thinking about as a solution. We can also think through, what challenges did we have during our caregiving experience? If you are still in a caregiving experience, you can think through, what are my current challenges? If caregiving has ended for you, you also want to think through, how do I stay current with the challenges that are happening today? So much has changed within the last 5 years. So much is different. And we want to stay tuned to what the current challenges are. Your experience might have had challenges that felt awful 7 years ago, but there might be changes to those challenges that make it even harder. And then who else had these challenges? The family caregiver who travels 2.5 hours with her mom for her mom's cancer treatments is a mom with 2 children. One of her kids has special needs. And her mom has also a rare disease. And so that impacted their treatment decision. So it's thinking through, for her, for instance, if she were to start a small business, who are the other moms with a child with special needs and a parent with a rare disease and cancer? What challenges do they experience? You can see how specific you can get about, who are you helping? Okay. So Amy is sharing the chat room. Thank you, Amy. So she's thinking through the idea for a user manual for our elders with all the information. So the manual includes all the information any medical staff would need to know, no matter where they are. People are overwhelmed and don't know even where to start. Organization could really help them, right? So it's the system, it's the process. It's the anxiety of, I am overwhelmed with this information. What do I do with it? And then you help them figure out what to do with it. And what's interesting is there's information we receive in paper form, and there's information we receive with verbal instructions. And then how do we capture both in a way that works? And then how do we keep track of both in a way that works? And Beth is sharing that she is thinking about something similar. So I love that. So Beth and Amy have a shared outcome that they can actually perhaps keep talking about. Okay, and they're going to touch base. You can also think about, well, what did you do that helped your situation? So what's the solution you created that you think, you know what, I think this could be something I can bring out into the marketplace? And I'd love for you to share in the chat room, what were the solutions that you developed that worked for you? You can also think about solutions as products, as systems, and as a philosophy. So my philosophy when I was caring for my parents was I was always going to tell the truth. And I was always going to allow others to receive whatever part of the truth they could in the way that they could and the timetable they could. That took me a while to figure out. So for instance, that's a strategy that could become a program. And it could be that you work with clients who receive updates about a carries situation. You work with them in 30-minute sessions to figure out what's the communication strategy about this update. Who do you tell? When do you tell them? How do you tell them? And then how do you respond when there's pushback? So you're working with clients on a regular basis around their communication strategy. We are the communication managers when we are the family caregivers. We're receiving the information and then parsing it out. We are the communications department of our caregiving situation. So you could have a coaching practice where that's what you do. A client shows up and says, this is what we learned today. Okay, let's figure out, how do you want to share it? When do you want to share it? Who gets what? And it could be that different family members and friends receive different versions of that information, right? So someone who is somewhat involved doesn't need to know all the details, but someone who is intimately involved may want to know all the details. Okay. And then how do you offer that solution to another family caregiver? We're going to talk a little bit about making an offer. So the solution becomes an offer. So if I were to create that solution, I can help you as the communications manager of your caregiving experience. I will create strategies for you during one-on-one coaching sessions. And I'm going to share on social media that that's what I do. So I could call myself the Caregiving Communications Strategist Coach. That might be a little too wordy, but it's off the top of my head. I'm specific about what I do. My name says what I do, and that's what I offer. If you have an idea about a particular solution, you want to capture some market insights from others about the solution. So think about a good question you could ask a family caregiver. It could be a version of that good question that you ask former family caregivers. So for instance, if you are going to help a family caregiver get organized, you could ask, How do you get organized? How do you stay organized? What gets in the way of being organized? You could also ask, if you could organize one aspect of your caregiving experience, what would it be? And then what's the challenge in organizing that? And I'd love for you to actually add any questions that you might have in the chat room, questions that you would love to ask family caregivers or former family caregivers. And as you interact with family caregivers and former family caregivers, when the door opens to ask the question, ask. It's important to also ask, what do they want and what gets in the way of having that? Because that's when your solution comes in. So let's start our day with good questions. That's a great question. So Beth is sharing in the chat room that she asks, what do they wish they had learned sooner about navigating healthcare? And then Beth, it's thinking through, okay, so now you know what they wish they had learned sooner. How do you share that information in a way that's digestible for an overwhelmed new family caregiver? So how do you ensure that education feels doable for the family caregiver? Because we're overwhelmed, right? We're stressed out. It's hard for us sometimes to digest more information. So what makes it digestible? What's the bite-sized version of that information? So some questions for you to use on a regular basis. And again, you can look to our Sunday question newsletter or just join us on Caring Our Way. And on Sundays, I pose a question. So here are some questions that I've asked in the past. How can I weed my relationship garden today? And you know what's nice about that question? Because that frees you up when you think, oh, that's not a relationship that serves me anymore. You just decide that's not a relationship that serves me anymore. And then you pivot to relationships that do. You don't have to make it dramatic. You don't have to write an email that says, I'm weeding my relationship garden and you are a weed, right? We just decide. I'm not interacting with the weeds, right? I'm walking around the weeds. What's my truth today? Who can I thank today? This is a great marketing strategy. Who can you thank today? Could be an email you send to someone that you've connected with through a networking event, through social media, and you just want to let them know that you appreciate their work. You could write notes and send them in the mail. And those really make a profound impact when you send a thank you note. You could send a thank you note to a provider that helped you during caregiving that you thought, I wish I had been better about thanking them. Thank them now. It's never too late to send a thank you note. You can send a thank you note to someone that helped you 15 years ago. And honest to goodness, they will just relish receiving that. What will be useful for me today? Then it reminds us to walk away from what's not useful. Who will bless me today? What will I quit today? Oh, I love this one, right? What will I quit today? I will quit beating myself up. I will quit doubting myself. I will quit giving into my fear. What will I quit today? How will I bring quality to my day? What's possible for me today? Which solution will find me today? Here's one that I really love. How will the friendly world help me today? Because oftentimes I talk about how mean and cold the world is, which does not help me, right? So if I instead remind myself that I can look at the world and decide there's friends in the world that will help me, then I see the friends in the world who are helping me. So what's the question that you're going to ask yourself today, right? You can think of a question that you're thinking in your head about the time you spend with me today. So if you have a question that you want answered during our time today, post that question in the chat room. So today is Saturday. So on Tuesday, I received an email about a funding opportunity. And I thought, oh, wow, this would be great. And then I connected with a researcher that I've been working with on another project. And I said, what do you think about this? And she said, yes, let's do it. And then I started thinking through the logistics, and I thought I could be the application. I could submit the application. And I thought, I don't have everything lined up. I'm not registered with sam.gov, which is where the funds funnel through. So then on Wednesday morning, I woke up and I thought, well, who could help me with this? Who do I know that could really help me with this? And then I had a meeting with this startup I mentioned earlier. And we were talking about this shared decision-making tool. And then they mentioned, well, we have a nonprofit. I said, you have a nonprofit that's yours? And they said, yes. I said, would you be interested in working on this grant? They said, of course, we'll submit the grant. We'll work with you on it. So there you go. So I asked the question. I was open to what the possibilities are. And now we're moving forward as a collaborative partner on this funding. It's always good to have a question to start your day. Who will help me? What will I learn? How will I grow? Who will be my first client? We're going to talk about booking a client. What will be my revenue stream that helps me today? Okay, so that's our first workshop. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and start up the recording for our next workshop.